Hello there, this is gilesfarmer, Games Development Lecturer at North West Kent College, and today I had the pleasure of interviewing Thaddeus Sasser from Visceral Games, an EA-owned studio. Thaddeus is currently working on Battlefield Hardline and has kindly taken time out of his busy schedule to answer a few questions about his career in the games industry. Okay, so could you tell us a little bit about your background and your career, and basically how did it all start out for you? How did you get into games design?
Sure. I was working as an IT professional in Santa Monica, which is in Southern California, and I saw an ad in the paper one day for game tester at Activision. I thought, you can get paid to play games? That sounds far better than what I'm doing now.
Yep.
Of course, I didn't know that you're getting paid to play the same broken game over and over and over and document all the problems and have a conversation with the developers about what the issues are and suggested fixes and all that. But it turned out to be right up my alley, and I really enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed interacting with the developers and finding out more about the process, about how games work. And after a couple years of doing this, I got the chance to go work at a studio and be an embedded tester over there. And that gave me an opportunity to meet the actual developers. And that studio was Gray Matter Interactive, who at the time were working on a game called Return to Castle Wolfenstein. It's a first-person shooter, like many of the games in my career have been. And I got along famously with the developers there and really enjoyed working with them. And apparently it was mutual because they asked me if I wanted a job as a scripter.
Fantastic.
I said, well, of course I do.
Yeah.
You don't even need to ask.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So I got my first job that way, and I got to work on the first expansion pack for Call of Duty called Call of Duty United Offensive.
Yeah.
And I got to design and script, 2 single-player levels and a multiplayer level, and just absolutely, at that point, I was in love with the whole profession.
Yeah.
It was a phenomenal experience.
I bet.
From there, Gray Matter got rolled into the Treyarch studio, and I worked on Call of Duty for 2 more games. And I thought, well, I've had enough of World War II. I want to try something else. At the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, after 6 years, you're kind of like, okay, I kind of got the hang of this World War II thing. I've been playing a lot of what was at the time a more modern military shooter called Rainbow Six. I don't know if you've heard of Rainbow Six.
Certainly have.
Okay. It's a Tom Clancy game, and very much about the realism, the authenticity, and bringing that immersive, realistic experience to players. And I was all about it. I thought I found out who made it, and I sent them a resume. I said, I've been working on Call of Duty, and I really want to work on your game. And they said, sure, come on out. So I went out there and I worked on Ghost Recon for the next 6 years, working for them, and shipped a couple titles, and then had the opportunity. EA called me up and said, hey, we're working on this game, would you like to come work on it? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I love Battlefield. So I got to come out here and I got to work on Battlefield 3 expansion pack 5, which was called Endgame. I got to be the designer on that, and then from there it kind of turned into the, would you like to be the lead multiplayer designer for Battlefield Hardline? And of course, again, as usual, of course I would. And that's kind of leads us up to where we are today.
Fantastic. Okay, that's a hell of a journey already. That's pretty much the be-all and end-all of first-person shooters right there in one man's career. So that's incredible, really. That's I'm very envious. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of envious students as well. That's incredible. So, like in your day-to-day at the moment, so as a lead multiplayer designer, what does that job particularly involve? So what does a lead multiplayer designer do?
Well, there's a lot of aspects to the job, and the job really changes over time, over the course of the project. Initially, it's about figuring out the basic framework, or it's kind of like being the architect of the game, is how I like to describe it. I mean, if you step back a level and you think about what are the core jobs in game development, you've got the engineers make it work, the artists make it pretty, and the designers make it fun. And the lead designer's job is to create a framework so that other designers can fit their pieces into this, and it all hangs together, and it all makes sense, and it's all cohesive. So it's about figuring out what are the systems. In our case, we made changes to the way some of the Battlefield system works. We have what we call a flexible progression system, which is the idea that as you play, you earn cash in-game, and you can spend this cash to unlock anything in the game. And this is very different than Battlefield 4 structure, which is very much a linear. You play this class, you get this gun after a certain amount of points, you play some more, you're in this gun after a certain amount of points. It's very much a linear structure.
Yeah.
And so, being the lead designer, you come up with the idea, okay, I want to solve some problems. What are the problems? Well, as Battlefield players have complained, they don't like having to play a class that they don't enjoy to unlock this cool thing they want to try. How do we fix this? And so it's looking at the problems in an existing franchise anyway. It's looking at the problems you want to solve and finding the right solutions for them, and figuring out how to create the space for other people to come in and contribute creatively to put their pieces in there, and make the whole thing still be cohesive. So as lead designer, that's part of the job. That's the initial part. Now, as the game development goes forward, you kind of become the proselytizer or evangelizer of the game concept and the game vision. Hey guys, this is going to be cops and robbers, and here's why it's going to be great. Here's how we're going to make it great. Here's the kind of ideas you can use to determine whether a concept fits in this fiction or not.
Okay.
Here are the basic pillars of the game design. Whether it's we've got to have destruction, we're going to have vehicles, we're going to have team play, encouraged but not enforced. We're going to have this unique through the gun shooting experience. We're going to have all these different things, and here's how they work together. You kind of continually get the team on board with these ideas and push them towards a unified vision. And then later in the project, it becomes about iterating on the content and offering kind of high-level feedback. Hey, this game mode is great, but what it's really lacking is user feedback. It needs more UI in this. Or, hey, there's too much user feedback. There's too much UI. We need to reduce it, make it because players aren't understanding it or whatever. And then a lot of the times after that, it becomes a little bit more of taking the same vision that you've sold to the team and selling it to the audience as well. Hey, guys, here's our game, and here's why it's great. Here's what we set out to make, and here's what we delivered. And being kind of a little bit of a face for the team as well.
Okay. I mean, how many people, in say like the design role, how many people would you be working with, say, on the multiplayer side of it? How many people would be in sort of an average team, maybe at Visceral or something like that? How many people would you be working alongside in just that role?
So in what is called AAA game development, you usually have an ebb and flow of people. You start off with a very small core team, like 12 to 15 people. Then as you get things more fleshed out, as you build the initial prototypes, as you show the promise of the game, and obviously you're continually demonstrating and showing this to the company and saying, guys, this is a great game, and here's why, here's what we've got, come check it out, it's awesome, it's fun. As you continue to prove yourselves, you get more and more resources to kind of flesh out your ideas and to make the game a reality. So it starts off very small, and I worked with one other designer initially. Actually, it was just me at first, and then I got another designer.
Nice.
And then as the project moved forward, we got more designers, and of course, in any company, people leave and they come and they go and so on. But I'd say probably around, in terms of just pure like assistant designers, about 3 to 4 people, including the level designers. Though it gets more to like 8 to 12, just for multiplayer. So there's a lot of different disciplines, and it depends whether you're talking: are we designing systems, are we designing levels, or are we designing characters and props and vehicles, or what have you. So I would say probably around 12 people at the max for designers.
Excellent. And like a AAA game, well, that's very interesting. Okay, that gives us a great insight into that, which again is something we would not know other than asking someone like yourself. Fantastic. So what does sort of a typical day at work look like for you? So sort of, would you be able to talk us through sort of, I know obviously no 2 days are the same, especially in the job that you do, but what would like a typical day sort of be like for you? Obviously lunch breaks or whatever else, toilet breaks don't have to be included, but what would a typical day be like for you? Jeez.
So again, this is really determines on where in the project you are.
Of course.
Right now, a typical day looks something like I'll come in, I'll check through my emails, I'll look for any things that are of high priority, if there's something on fire or something that needs immediate attention. I spend a lot of time still in presentations where I'm talking to, whether it's marketing or talking to executives, and thinking about the results from the previous things we've done too. For example, we just had a public beta, so there's a lot of conversation about what did you guys learn from the beta, what are you doing about it, and I present here's what we saw, here's what the data said, here's our analysis of it, and here's our reaction to it, things of that nature. Some of it will be spent in reviewing the current process of whatever we're working on. So if we're making maps, for example, I'll spend a portion of my day playing those maps along with the rest of the designers and the rest of the team and analyzing that and offering my input on that as well. So, obviously there's a fair amount of email, there's a fair amount of meetings and so on, as you probably expect in a larger corporate environment. But does that give you a good sense of what my day might be?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Okay, the planning side and making sure it's all working cohesively and stuff it kind of fantastically gives us an overview. And it sounds like your QA experience from sort of your early days and stuff obviously then feeds into what you've been doing. So everything that you've done is sort of platforms you and leads you on to the next role. So you can always tap into your experience that you were doing maybe at Activision or Grey Matter or whatever in the early days and things like that.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good point. Is that designers kind of have to be a little bit more broad than they are specialized a lot of times. Like as an engineer or an artist, you tend to specialize on one thing. Oh, I'm really good at making models, or I'm really good at making vehicles, or I'm really good at making textures, or I'm really good at network or rendering engineering or whatever. But as a designer, it behooves you to have a much broader skill set than does a specialized skill set, because you'll be thrown into a lot of different situations where that kind of experience can help you figure out what you think the right answer is.
Fantastic, because that kind of answers another question I was going to go into from the student side of it, and the young developers, not necessarily always young, but the indie developers and that coming into it, they have to almost be a jack of all trades, sort of almost, to understand each area, especially students, because they're tested on each of the areas. Would you say it's good for them to understand each area, or should they put, say, all their eggs in one basket and specialise in one area and maybe focus on, well, I want to be a level designer, so I'm going to hone my level design skills and sort of not appreciate the concept art side or anything like that? Would you say, I mean, from what you're saying there, maybe having understanding of each of the areas actually is far more beneficial than maybe specialising completely in one area?
I think it depends on the profession a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like I mentioned for designers, understanding other people's jobs can be critical.
Of course.
Because if I'm going to go design a system, I can go design the most fantastic system in the world, but if that's not realistic in the engine or in the tool set, I'm wasting everybody's time.
Of course.
But if I have a really clear idea on the first steps to prototype this idea, and maybe even I mock it up in I don't want to say my spare time, but as part of my daily course of work, if I can be like, hey guys, I have this idea on how we can improve X, and here's a prototype I built that demonstrates X, and you can see clearly that it's more fun than not having X.
Yeah.
That's a huge step forward, and everybody goes, okay,
Yeah,
I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
I can see how we can estimate the amount of work. I can tell here's where the different tiers of the feature would be. So if we can only do this, the core of it is this, but if we want to make it better, we do this, and then if we really reach for the moon, we can do this, that kind of thing. It becomes a lot easier to talk across the disciplines too if you have that kind of knowledge. So again, as a designer, I would definitely encourage designers to understand the art process, understand the engineering process, know how logic, basic logic works, know how to get into an engine and start pulling it apart. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to get in there and start dissecting schematics or Kismet diagrams or figuring out how to set up a new level or whatever it is. Designers benefit greatly from all of that kind of detailed knowledge in a broad sense. Now, I don't know if that makes as much sense for some other disciplines. I'm a designer, obviously. I think I've seen a lot of artists really specialize. Like, I'm an animator and I work on humans. I work on bipedal motion. Or, like I said, I'm a texture artist. I'm really, really good at creating realistic-looking textures or whatever. But you'd probably be better served getting that information from somebody else. No,
it's fantastic. It's great. Your insight is invaluable, really, and that's fantastic, because obviously we have got students looking at the design process and things, and it's great to, especially for them and other people further afield, to really have an idea about, oh right, I am doing the right thing and I really want to get an understanding of all these things and I am training in the right areas and stuff. So it's fantastic to hear it from someone like yourself to sort of put their minds at ease, really. Can I just ask, sort of, what skills do you feel that sort of are essential for your job? So say, for example, do you feel like communication skills, your job that you do in the lead multiplayer designer role or any design role, what skills do you feel are the most important skills, should we say, to your job?
I think communication is obviously key. Part of the designer's job is to communicate the intent, the vision in his head. And it doesn't matter if you have the best vision if nobody else can understand it or you can't get other people on board with it. So communication is definitely one of the most important skills. That's written communication, that's verbal communication. It's being able to stand up in front of a group and convince that group that you know what you're talking about and that they should be excited about what you're talking about. So that's a key part for sure. I think another helpful skill is logic. I studied symbolic and predicate logic, and it's been of great help to me in both constructing arguments, because you'll make a lot of arguments, a lot of reactive arguments, defensive arguments, but even proactive arguments, trying to convince people of your point of view. I think those are both very, very solid skills to have. And in addition to that, I think as a designer, you need to be experienced. You need to be well-read. You need to be able to travel. You need to be able to get a sense of other perspectives and other people's point of views, because you're going to have to understand the audience. The audience isn't one demographic or one type of person. It's as many people as you can get interested in your design. And I think having that shared human experience is really key for designers. It doesn't hurt to have a knowledge of history. Like, I've worked on World War II games, and my fascination with World War II aviation served me in great stead at many times when I was trying to figure out, And what we really need is we need a BF-109 in this scene because it's about this battle and these planes showed up at this time and blah, blah, blah. And we'll make it even more authentic and immersive. Or, whatever little bit of knowledge you might have. So again, I would say as a designer, having that kind of breadth of knowledge is very important.
Fantastic. Okay. I mean, yeah, there's no difference to sort of the animation. That's my background is sort of animation and 3D modeling and stuff like that. And from what I always hear in interviews and stuff, they say, "Oh, you must live and you must watch films and understand what you do and don't like about them, break them down." So I'm guessing it's no different to games. So you can use your own personal experiences and your interests and things, and they become part of it rather than focusing solely on the game stuff. You actually can use enriching experiences from your life and stuff and reflect those into your games. Does that kind of help? Do you think? Does that kind of enrich?
That's absolutely the case. I mean,
yeah.
I think it depends on what kind of designer you are, but the kind of experiences I like to be involved in creating are the immersive ones, the ones that help you escape from your reality and experience something you wouldn't necessarily need to get or be able to do. So if it's something like flying in an airplane, I want to know what that feels like so I can translate that in a game. If it's something like firing a gun, I want to know what that feels like so I can accurately represent it in a game. And I think being able to have those real-world experiences is key to figuring out how to translate it into a different medium.
Fantastic. So it's almost like you're putting yourself in their shoes, you're understanding someone else's perspective, but understanding what it's like to be in that moment. You're putting your ability to relate to others and understand their experiences, and then you can relay them in the game. So you're thinking what the audience would be expecting or feeling, and that's a heck of a talent. Please, can I ask, if you could make like a skill requirement sheet or something for people trying to get into the industry, what would be sort of right at the top of the list? I'm not talking sort of software skills, any particular development skills, but I just mean sort of skills. I mean, presuming this person had a wonderful portfolio, what other things would you sort of be looking for from them?
Well, one of the first things I look for is how designers are kind of born in a sense. I mean, you could be made, obviously, but designers have a deep curiosity about systems and how they're put together. And most of the time, they've toyed with the systems. They've pulled them apart. They've looked at them. They've rearranged the pieces. So I'd be looking for evidence that this person had done this because they're passionate about it. Not because it was a course requirement, not because it was expected to be put on a resume, but because they care, because they're interested in it. Like long before I was a game designer, I was building levels in early primitive modeling software for Quake and games like that. I was taking apart the data files for games like Civilization and building my own units and building my own rule sets. And that's the kind of thing I look for. Somebody who's proactive about digging into somebody else's content and reassembling it in a different way tells me a lot about them as a designer. I go, oh, okay, I get you. I understand where you're coming from. You're passionate about this. You're interested in it. You're curious about it. And having those attributes is very, very important for a designer. And that word I use, proactive, I use that deliberately because as a designer, you can't just sit around and wait for requests to be made. You constantly have to be thinking forward. You have to be thinking in advance because these things take a long time to put into effect and to get right. And the more you can get a jump on what it is that you're going to need, the more thought and the more time you can put into it before anybody else knows that you're going to need it, the better off you're going to be. And everybody else is going to be too, the people who rely on you to provide that kind of insider design.
So if I round it off with this question, is that okay? Yeah, we'll just go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic, Thad. Thank you ever so much. So just on a note to finish with, if theoretically, okay, if you could go back in time and give like a 16-year-old version of yourself any advice that would help you with your career, obviously you found your path, but if you could give yourself any advice that would sort of help, anything you would like to have known or developed or stuff like that, what advice would you give yourself?
There's about three things. The first is to be bold. It's to believe in what it is that you want to achieve and don't give up on it. And that can be tricky sometimes because the world can really take its toll on you. But I think it's important to believe in what it is you want to express. And the next point is tied closely to this, and this is have an open mind and seek critical feedback. Don't seek critical feedback from just anybody. Seek critical feedback from people you respect or you admire, who've done the same thing that you're doing, who do it better than you do. That's very important, is to continue to refine and reshape your core idea or the core things you're going after. And then I think the third thing is to be willing to be accountable. When you make a mistake, own it. Acknowledge that you made it and don't do it again. And that's part of the feedback process and being bold is to say, okay, I screwed that up, but I know how I screwed it up, I know why I screwed it up, I know how not to do it again in the future. And not repeating those mistakes is a core part of getting better as a designer.
Well, Thaddeus Sasser, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and on behalf of everyone at Northwest Kent College, I really am grateful, and students everywhere. Hopefully, this will help them. And please keep up the good work. We love what you do, and we're ever so grateful that you've given us your time this morning for you or this evening for us, and we're ever so grateful. And just want to wish you the best for the future.
Well, thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure chatting with you as well, and don't hesitate to reach out again in the future.
Really do appreciate it, Thad. All the best for the rest of the day.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks
have a
a lot.
pleasant evening.
Thanks, and yourself. Thank you very much. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Okay, so that was Thaddeus Sasser from Visceral and EA Games, currently working as lead multiplayer designer on Battlefield Hardline. I think you agree that was a very insightful and helpful interview. Thanks for listening.